Hello, everyone. I thought I was just going to be able to sit down, live stream some Planes of Eidolon, and then do a video talking about that and how Warframe has gotten from then to now. Turns out some things have happened. Yes, indeed. And that means we put our pirate hat on because of this. However, I'm not ready to talk about that quite yet because something even more urgent popped up. We're going to keep the hat on, but this is kind of a big deal because Humble Bundle is joining forces with IGN. So, what is Humble Bundle? Well, Humble Bundle is a website where you can pay what you want and receive a bundle of games. If you pay more, then you receive more. Traditionally, you could choose exactly where this money went, to which charity, and you could actually choose how much Humble Bundle got, how much the charities got, and how much went to the original developers. It was a really neat way of donating to charity whilst also supporting developers by splitting your bundle donation. Reports say that Humble Bundle started off as a mom and pop organization, just a couple of people living out of their parents' house, and that no one ever expected it to blow up this big. However, it wasn't without trouble, and they ended up having to lay off 12 people after overestimating how big they would blow up. I mean, Humble Bundle is still growing. They are still a known brand that brings value when you buy bundles. However, there's always a point in a business where growth slows and becomes more steady. And unfortunately, looks like Humble Bundle was operating earlier off the explosive growth model instead of the, we need to be conservative with our capital model. And the result is apparent. We're going to be talking about this today. IGN. This means that Humble Bundle has been acquired by IGN. You can add PC Gamer to your list of charities now because, Humble Bundle's never truly been a charity. It's allowed you to buy things and then for a percentage of that to go to charity, and you got to choose out of the bundles what percentage went to charity, but they heavily pushed a default amount that actually favored themselves and the company that was making the donation of the game, because the games weren't really being donated. The game companies that were paying into Humble Bundle were accepting that they could have a loss on a few of them if people moved the sliders the wrong way, but for the most part, they would get their payback. Humble Bundle has been extremely effective in selling games, and that's what this is. It's a game store. That's why when people ask, well, can I write Humble Bundle off as a donation? No, you're making a purchase. Now, I can write Humble Bundle off as a business expense because I'm buying that game for business purposes, but I would need to file that specifically. And in that case, I couldn't use it for personal use unless I went through a set of procedures. And they would have to be filed properly. And understanding that is part of running a business. But getting off track here, Humble Bundle is now partnered with IGN. What does this mean? Well, in my personal opinion, and keep in mind, I'm not going to be doing a fall of Humble Bundle, how it happened video. You'll have to do your own research on this. However, I'm going to harken back to one of my favorite old games, Quake 1. Quake 1 was fairly difficult to find servers for. You had to know the IP address. I knew the 128.95.20, I knew that off the top of my head, the IP addresses of my favorite servers. I could just type in the IP address and bam, connect. Most people didn't have that luxury. And if I hadn't typed those numbers so many times, I wouldn't have remembered them either. However, in order to facilitate finding servers better, a bunch of server browsers started getting developed. The biggest one was Gamespy. Gamespy was a big deal, and it was what was called shareware, where you could have access to all the features in order to get connected to your favorite server, or You could go with friends and server tracking, where you could actually track players and do all these crazy things within the browser, and that was premium features that you paid for. So you were paying for the cost of development of the software. id Software didn't have a problem with that because they didn't have an internal server browser. id Software decided to ignore the trademark infringement, Quake and Quake Spy. And this led to the advent of various community sites like PlanetQuake. Well, eventually, Quake Spy would become Gamespy. And Gamespy would become the premier in server browsing. So whether it be Quake, Quake 2, Half-Life, all these different servers, the best way to find a game was using Gamespy. And Gamespy was a little more clunky than Quake Spy, but it still worked well. And because I had bought into it back in the original days, it was still accessible to me. I had an unlimited use license, so it didn't matter what version of Quake Spy Arcade or whatever they came out with. I had access to it with my old CD key, which was awesome. Up until the very, very end, Gamespy was really good about respecting its founders, or the people who originally paid into it. So as I see the Gamespy name being affixed to the websites like PlanetQuake, Planet Half-Life, Planet Fortress, Captured.com, all of these websites which were devoted to different Doom, Quake, and Half-Life mods, even Planet Warcraft, for example. Like, you could just go to Planet pretty much anything related to gaming and you would find a Gamespy run website based around that. But PlanetQuake and all of these other websites would begin to slow down. I began to notice as websites like Captured.com or Planet Fortress were slowly phased out and would transition you back to Gamespy's main site, and then later on IGN's main site. Now, there was a good portion of the community which weren't really huge in favor of Morrowind Nexus, aka TES Nexus. This was its own website. It hadn't become Nexus Mods yet, but they went and they used the alternative, File Planet. Unfortunately, when IGN acquired Gamespy, they began to restructure the company. And as we saw Gamespy failing in various games, like Borderlands, we had all kinds of trouble because we wanted to play Borderlands through Steam or Borderlands alone, and the Gamespy network that was interconnecting them kind of broke. It wasn't a good situation. But where my rambling is headed is I'm trying to explain the overall history of how QuakeSpy became Gamespy, acquired by IGN. And websites now that used to be affiliated with the PlanetQuake network and were integral to gaming as a whole, because we had our modding sites, we had our file sharing sites, we had all of these things. They all started to look like this as IGN began to shut down the PlanetQuake network, or the Gamespy network, whatever you wanted to call it at this point. I still visited PlanetQuake for a while until they decided to end updates on it. There are still websites devoted to Quake 1 and Quake 2 these days, and you can find them all around the internet. However, there's nothing unified that brings people to it anymore. It used to be when a new map came out, even several years after the game had become irrelevant by Quake 3, you would see a post on PlanetQuake that said, oh, a new map. And so there would immediately be 4 or 5 servers online that were running deathmatch on that new map. That's the power of having a centralized site that everyone knows to go to. So as a result, the community's been fractured, and fractured hard, because of IGN. Now, if we have a peek at the goodbye and thank you from the Gamespy team, we can read a simple, Ziff Davis wants to run an efficient, focused company, and managing different sites that all cover video games isn't exactly a model of efficiency. Even though Gamespy has its unique voice that was separate and distinct from our sister sites, it is hard to argue that logic, even though it does suck. So pretty much, hey, Gamespy and IGN are both game-focused sites that kind of do news and talk about things. Why are we paying these two people to compete with each other? At least that's the appearance of the original article. If that's true or not, I don't know. But the fact that all these different websites that used to be catering to the community now lead to these broken pages, and we have to rely on websites like Mod History to try to find and salvage some of the things during the Great File Planet Nuke, we kind of have reason to pause and think about this, to consider the fact that Humble Bundle is joining forces with IGN. Now, if you think Humble Bundle is going to be corrupted by IGN, clearly you haven't been paying attention very much. Because remember that area where you could choose to give to charities, like any charity you wanted, instead of the developers? Now they choose a charity. The charity choice is gone. Unless, of course, it's a different bundle. And then you can choose your own charity. They've always worked closely with the companies to make sure that the ideal situation is working for them. And when they force you to use a specific charity, as opposed to choosing your own charity, I highly, highly recommend looking into the connection between that charity and the reasoning that charity is being chosen. Between that company. They've already been making business deals as it is. Now, I'm not going to say that they're scummy, and I'm not going to say that this isn't charity, but I'm also going to say that this is a business, and that expectations need to be set commensurate with the fact that this business is being acquired by IGN, the same people who put half of the really big gaming websites in their coffins. Thank you all for watching, everybody. Next time we're going to get our swords out and shout avast as we delve into this Shadow of War, Battlefront 2, Overwatch mess that everyone's talking about, just clamoring on and on about loot boxes. It's more than just loot boxes. It's more insidious than that, and we'll definitely be getting into that next time. Check the links on screen for more content, and I will see y'all next time.